Naughty Dog have announced that The Last of Us 2 will not have multiplayer, despite having previously said that it was coming. The news has been met by disappointment, toxicity, and accusations that Naughty Dog are shortchanging the players. Just another day in the gaming industry, Mr. Henry Cooper.
You're goddamn right. We gotta love a bit of toxic entitled gamers.
I think this story is a lot about the state of toxicity in the community than anything. But let's jump into
bring out a wider conversation.
First off, the statement from Naughty Dog confirming that there is no multiplayer in The Last of Us Part 2. It reads as follows. We wanted to address multiplayer in The Last of Us Part 2. As we've stated, the single-player campaign is far and away the most ambitious project Naughty Dog has ever undertaken. Sounds good, right? That's what we want. Likewise, as developers began on the evolution of our factions mode from The Last of Us Part 1, which is the multiplayer component, the vision of the team grew beyond an additional mode that could be included with our enormous single-player campaign. Wanting to support both visions, we made the difficult choice that The Last of Us Part 2 would not include an online mode. However, you will eventually experience the fruits of our team's online ambition, but not as part of The Last of Us Part 2. When and where it will be realised is still to be determined, but rest assured, we are as big a fan of factions as the rest of our community and are excited to share more when it's ready. Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog.
Bad dog.
How dare you?
Get the spray out and give them a douse.
So, in summary, single player is now beefed up so much that they don't have time to develop or co-develop the multiplayer. Also, the multiplayer component that they've been working on is so big that it just won't fit in the same box. They've already got two DVDs versus Blu-rays.
Yeah, they say it's their biggest game yet, and the current biggest Naughty Dog game would probably be Uncharted 4, and that's about 15 hours long, which is kind of par for the course these days. 15 to 20 hours is your average single player big AAA thing anyway.
Yeah, I like how they termed it though. Far and away the most ambitious project. They've not said the biggest game.
Yeah, ambitious, exactly. That's the word.
The project is ambitious.
In terms of story and scope, it's not necessarily going to be super long. It's going to be long, but it's not going to be like 70 hour.
It's not limited. It's not limited to the length of the game is what is the important bit, right? What I like is that they decided not to scale things back. You know, they could have shipped a multiplayer component with The Last of Us Part 2 if they wanted to, but because the ambitions kind of exceeded their time frame, I guess, they didn't just tack it on, because that's done a lot often, isn't it? Just tacking on a little bit multiplayer component just to tick the boxes, just so the publisher's happy, just so that people are more likely to buy a game. And the multiplayer component, well, it was great in the first one by all accounts, but it's just there to serve a certain percentage of people. Yeah,
I think this decision will satisfy most people, because The Last of Us is primarily a single player story driven thing. It's what it's known for. By all accounts, the multiplayer component was very fun. I never played it personally, so I'm not going to miss it, but everyone who did like it seems to think, oh, that was a bit of a shame. Some people think a bit more strongly about it.
Yeah, true. We'll get into that in just a second. The good thing is that they definitely are still working on a multiplayer thing. There's not going to be with The Last of Us Part 2, so you're not going to get it as part of that game specifically. However, it doesn't rule out them releasing it as a freebie in future to owners of the game, a bit like they did with GTA and GTA Online, and that was obviously Rockstar.
I think that's the thing I would expect them to do, rather than release The Last of Us Factions as like its own entirely standalone thing. I reckon they'll add it as essentially an expansion to the existing Last of Us infrastructure.
Yeah, they're not releasing details of that yet. They said when and where it will come is yet to be decided, but I wouldn't put it past them charging for this additional content, because if you think they say it's so ambitious they can't ship it with the game, therefore it's big enough and they've probably put enough time in and effort in to maybe warrant an additional purchase, like a standalone DLC, and they've been known to do that in the past, haven't they?
Yeah, because when Uncharted 4 came out to widespread acclaim. It's probably the best one in the series, and they instantly started plans for a DLC for it, but eventually that became too big for a DLC, but not quite big enough for a full-fledged Uncharted 5. And the original idea was that it would be in a similar sort of scope to The Last of Us is Left Behind DLC, which focused on a small kind of flashbacky element of the story, but it was only about 2 to 3 hours long and launched for only about $10, well, just under $10. In Uncharted's case, they then brought out Lost Legacy as its own standalone thing, which is about 8 to 10 hours and launched for $40. And there was a bit of a debate about whether or not it was worth it at the time, because it is such a smaller experience and it's not quite full, industry standard price, but it's a bit less. But at the time, Sean Eskig, who was I think the narrative lead, said to The Verge, "It's a nice, tight story, but it's an Uncharted game for sure. We've not even done it yet. It's expanding as we talk." So I feel like this is a good way to do DLCs. You start with a small plan and then just let your imagination run wild.
Yeah.
Because I think with God of of War as well, they had DLCs planned for that, but they got too big, and those DLC ideas have been folded into the sequel.
And I feel like that if the content is worth the money, why not charge for it?
Yeah.
If this standalone multiplayer component of The Last of Us, or this multiplayer in a Last of Us world type thing, whatever they call it, if it's worth the money, if it's really worth it, then why not charge for it? They've put the effort in, they've developed it, why not? But anyway, the responses so far online have been varying from somewhat understandable to completely shameful, in my opinion. But first, over on Reddit, it's surprisingly been pretty laid back over there. Quite a few I'm disappointed about this comments.
Yeah.
You know, you're entitled to be disappointed. One of the example of that is from Ram Ranch, who says, "This is a huge bummer for me. The Last of Us multiplayer felt pretty unique, and I was hoping to get another version, considering the current version is overrun with hardcore veterans who know every single spawn point and angle. I was really looking forward to having something to play after the story wraps up. I hope they do a surprise content update with it or something, and we are just getting faked out. But I know that's a stupid hope to hold on to. Man, this sucks. Assassin's Creed multiplayer, now Last of Us, RIP." I mean, that's an understandable feeling. I mean, he making his feelings known. I'm not against that. You don't agree with the decision, you don't like it, that's fine.
He has every right to be upset, but he's not being cancerous and demanding that they reshape their entire development schedule around my needs.
Yeah. Well, talking of cancerous and toxic, let's head over to Twitter, because some of the top responses to the announcement on Twitter are pretty horrible, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Top one I've got here from Miami LeBron. "Only casuals are okay with this. Any competitive gamer would have wanted factions, but the casuals always win."
I hate that song. Casuals it's almost a slur these days among the quote-unquote hardcores.
Elitists, I call them.
Wankers, I like to call them.
Wankers. Fucking embarrassing.
But
Who gives a shit? Any competitive game would have wanted factions. Yeah, but there's hundreds of competitive games. Yeah, it's a shame that this mode isn't in there if that's the kind of thing you like, but there are other options.
Calling people who like single-player narrative campaigns casuals is a new one for me. Surely it's the multiplayer, like hordes of people are the casuals.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not going to get into who the actual casuals are. It just seems pretty weird that he's calling the single-player, like, I'd call them hardcore single-player game. You know, the old-school gamers who like single-player. They're the casuals now, apparently, but no, according to Miami LeBron. Anyway, next up, Baron Black, who is he's actually a YouTuber. We've checked out his video on the matter. It was a choice video. It was a choice video.
Entertaining.
It was entertaining. Don't bother watching it, I would say. But anyway, his comment is, "Lol, that's the excuse you're gonna give? That's not an excuse, that's an explanation."
Yeah.
It's a well-written, it's about 5 or 6 sentences, a couple of paragraphs. It's a lot of explanation as to why they've taken the decision and how things have panned out. But I mean, if you want to call an excuse, that's fine, but you're pushing your own agenda there. You got to acknowledge that.
It's essentially them saying, we want to make a better game than we would if we had multiplayer in there, so we're not going to do multiplayer. You're getting a superior product. Well, that's up for debate, but their angle is that we're giving you a superior product because we've made this decision, and he's calling that an excuse.
And the last one is slightly more reasonable. Broken game, HDR saying, "Not good enough." I mean, again, it's just voicing his opinion. He's not really being that toxic, but not good enough. Well, yeah, it's your opinion.
And we don't know how big the actual game is yet. I feel like it's really harsh to jump to these sorts of conclusions in terms of quality, because we just don't know yet. It's likely to be good, but we don't know.
This is the question, right? If the game launches and the single player component just blows you away because there's so much to it and it's awesome, why would you want to hold them to attacking on a multiplayer? Obviously, these commenters here are fans of the multiplayer or the original multiplayer or prefer multiplayer to single player. Why the hell are you targeting The Last of Us for your multiplayer needs? Go away.
Go away.
The Last of Us is one of the best single-player games ever made, ever, and you're attacking it for no multiplayer. Come on, get a life, man. Understand how games work, man. That's just delusional, if you ask me.
And if what you get from Last of Us is multiplayer, if that's what you like about it and it's not there, okay, I could get that you'd be upset about it, but you can find multiplayer anywhere. No one really does Last of Us's gritty, grounded story, very emotionally driven, very character driven. Then this one in particular is trying to ask like uncomfortable questions. No one quite does that in the same way The Last of Us does, and that's why I like it. They give me what no one else does.
Maybe part of the reason why they are upset is because Naughty Dog had confirmed previously in 2018 that factions will be coming in The Last of Us Part 2. Now, co-director Anthony Newen said to GameSpot back in 2018, factions is coming back, and co-director Kurt Margianu says, multiplayer is coming back. We're not going to talk details yet about what that format takes, but we can confirm there will be multiplayer. Now, you can kind of understand people being a little bit disappointed.
So you could
they were promised it, right?
Yeah, you can argue that they were promised it, but I feel like they've not ruled it out. They've
not like it's not coming.
Yeah, they've not cancelled it. They've put it on pause. They've obviously done a lot of work on it, and they would have paused this development months ago. We're only just hearing about it now while they're dropping all of this new information. They've made this decision a long time ago, and it won't have been out of the blue.
So another response on Twitter comes from Ashaya Keena, who says, "Not everything needs multiplayer. Don't listen to those nerds," and that's got more likes or hearts than any other.
Yeah, it's got 1,000 likes,
which is great.
I like the sass on that one as well.
Yeah, there's a meme attached to it saying "location under these bitches' skin." So there's a bit of sass with that. However, Stephen Hancock comes back. "You're not under anyone's skin, LMAO. You're a moron who defends getting less. Great for you. You're an idiot." Now, the notion of getting less has been under a bit of debate in the office here. We kind of got a different perspective on this. If you take this toxicity out of his comment, is this actually getting less? If they've been promised the multiplayer, I kind of think that maybe they are getting less than what they were promised.
Well, I think you can't say you're getting less until we know how much we're getting in the first place, for starters. But taking away the multiplayer, that's taking away one thing. But using all of those resources, all of that time to then increase the single player, you're getting more single player content than you would multiplayer content, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think again, I don't want to say getting more, but I think you're getting more.
It depends how you quantify things. So if a single component is just one thing and the multiplayer component is another thing, you're getting two things, right? Yeah. If you're measuring it on the size of the single player campaign, the amount of hours that you game playing it, that's another way to measure the size of something. But for people who wanted the single player and multiplayer, which is two things to them, and they're only getting now a one thing, which is a single player, that is essentially less, right?
It's mass versus volume, essentially.
There we go.
You can have a greater volume by having two things, or having smaller volume and having one thing, but that one thing having greater mass. And I know personally, I'm going to sink loads of hours into the single player. I'm going to get loads out of that part of the content, and if the multiplayer was there, I'd probably dance with it for no more than 10 hours, really.
Not that I agree with this Stephen Hancock dude, but I think they should have
just rude.
Yeah, I think they just should have shut their mouths about multiplayer last year. I mean, if they say that it's coming and people like pre-order it or whatever based on the information that they give in these interviews saying, oh, multiplayer is coming, but then they don't deliver that, I can see his point when he thinks he's getting less. It doesn't mean I agree with him. I can see his point when they're coming out saying this game's going to have multiplayer, people pre-order, and lo and behold, there's no multiplayer. But that's just my opinion, and just let us know what you think down in the comments, I guess.
Well, before they even officially posted this statement on Twitter, lead game designer Amelia Schatz, unfortunate name, said to US Gamer, "We're focusing on a single player experience, so we're just making a single player game for this." And then obviously they came out and made the multiplayer statement. And that's the key point, is that that's their area of focus. That's what they're choosing to do. It's their creative decision. And I don't feel like you can get mad at them for that creative decision. You can be disappointed, by all means. You're not getting a multiplayer mode that you really liked the previous version of. Totally understand that. But they've chosen this.
It was a considered decision. They haven't just shat it out, right? Shats it out. And the game could be awful. It could be awful. And then that will be their cross to bear when it comes out in February. I'm sorry, Amelia. That was just a low blow. I'm such a child.
You're the naughty dog.
Don't put me down. I mean, as far as where I sit on this, my personal takeaway from it, there are too many multiplayer games as it is. Don't be targeting and criticizing Naughty Dog for lack of Last of Us Part 2 multiplayer. Last of Us Part 1 was one of my favorite games ever, and I never even touched the multiplayer. And I understand people have strong feelings for the multiplayer component of that game because it was surprisingly very, very good according to so many people who played it. And I get that, and I understand your disappointment, but they should be free as creators to try and realize their ambition with everything that they want to do. They should never be confined by other people's expectations. And I feel like people pressuring them and criticizing them for not fulfilling a certain small percentage of the community's desires to have a multiplayer, it's just wrong. Like, I just feel like they should be free to realize their ambition and try and make the single player game as good as it possibly could be without having the burden of having to split your resources and work concurrently on a multiplayer tacked on version of the game.
I've seen people arguing that having no multiplayer means no innovation, which is absurd because those two things aren't mutually exclusive. All the innovation will happen in the story mode, and then it will carry over into multiplayer when those mechanics are just the focus and there is no story. But you've got deeper stealth mechanics. You can go prone, you can crouch, you can crawl and all that sort of stuff. There's scent trails to avoid the dogs, which I've never really seen before. There's increased mobility so you can jump, and there's a bit more platforming and verticality to everything. Better enemy AI. NPCs even have names and they will react accordingly to that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And there's dogs.
There is dogs that you kill.
I did see a
awesome,
thing,
right?
There was a headline, "In The Last of Us 2, you'll be killing lots of dogs," and Neil Druckmann, the series director, whatever, tweeted, "If you choose to," just saying,
you don't have to
well, we
kill
don't
the
have to kill all of them.
Well, we know so much about the game now, having had the lid blown right off of it over the last few days. There's been journalists come out with hands-on impressions of this gameplay out there. There's also Neil Druckmann talking about the trailer that he put out recently. There's so much material to get your teeth into now if you want to go and find it. So go and check all that info out about what the game's going to play like, how it looks like, all these new features that we just discussed now. So go and check them out.
But make sure you let us know down in the comments what you think about the multiplayer. Did you have fun with the original factions mode? Are you going to miss that it's not here this time? Or are you glad that they can just focus all of their efforts on the single player, which is what most of us really want? Make sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button and hit the bell to stay notified when we post new content. Go on over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming to support our content. Happy Outbreak Day, everybody. Bye for now.